Russians have been claiming for the second day that they have entered the Dnipropetrovsk region and are expanding their foothold there. Today, Kremlin press secretary Dmitry Peskov stated that a so-called buffer zone is being created there. And in general, right now, Moscow is trying to convince us that Russians have already entered the Dnipropetrovsk region. They breached the administrative border between Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions, and hostilities are now occurring there. In the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, they say that this is all a lie. Nothing of the sort is happening. Nevertheless, military analysts say that we should keep an eye on this direction because something bad might happen there in the near future. Let's figure out together what's really happening on the border of Dnipropetrovsk region. So what are the Russians saying? What is the Ukrainian side saying? That is the General Staff. What are they saying, for example, in the Operational Strategic Group of Forces, Pechiy, that's the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and what are American military analysts saying about this? And of course, we'll also check out the map. My name is Pechiy. It is June 9th today. Let's go through everything step by step. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and leave any comment you wish. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News, link in the video description. So, as you may have already heard, on June 7th, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation announced that units of the 90th Tank Division of the Center Group of Forces had reached the western border of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and are continuing their offensive into the territory of Dnipropetrovsk region. That was a quote. At the same time, the Deep State Project reported that the Russians are about 2 kilometers away from the Dnipropetrovsk region. According to the battle map as of June 5, the enemy has entrenched themselves 2,000 meters from the administrative borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Analysts noted that Russian troops are indeed pressing forward with the forces of 1 brigade and 2 regiments, which have been reinforced with fresh recruits. On June 8, the Russians continued to claim that they are advancing in the Dnipropetrovsk region. However, Ukrainian military officials deny this claim. Already this morning, on June 9, Kremlin press secretary Dmitry Peskov stated that supposedly the Russians are continuing their advance in the Dnipropetrovsk region and are already creating a so-called buffer zone there, as Putin stated regarding the Kharkiv and Sumy regions. But the defense forces of Ukraine emphasized that in the area of combat responsibility of the 31st Separate Brigade, the situation remains tense. Quote, the enemy does not abandon its intentions to enter the Dnipropetrovsk region, but our soldiers bravely and skillfully defend their front section, thwarting the occupiers' plans. This work does not stop for even a minute. In turn, the representative of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Major Andrei Kovalev, stated in a comment that the report about the Russians advancing in this direction is fake. Quote, this information does not correspond to reality. Fighting continues in the Donetsk region, and the text provided is Russian disinformation. According to the map, the Russian Federation Army has not even reached the administrative border of Dnipropetrovsk region yet. In addition, the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council also refuted the fabrication by Dmitry Peskov and stated that it is an informational provocation that has nothing to do with reality. Quote, as of the morning of June 9, all information from the Russians, including Peskov's statement about their offensive in Dnipropetrovsk region, does not correspond to reality. I should note right away that this is not the first time the Russians have claimed so-called advances deep into the Dnipropetrovsk region, because back in May of this year, the Russians already reported that the troops of the Russian Federation had allegedly crossed the administrative border with Donetsk region near Novonikolayevka. And I think you remember those shots when a pickup truck supposedly broke through the barbed wire and entered the territory of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Then it turned out that it was a Ukrainian pickup truck, and the Russians ran there to take pictures and were destroyed. At the same time, the spokesperson for the Operational Strategic Group of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Pechiy, Viktor Trehubov, said that there are no Russian invaders. Near the administrative border of Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions, the occupiers are once again spreading disinformation. Quote, if you refute it every time, it will only spread their disinformation further? No, right now I can simply say no. Absolutely. There are no Russians now on the territory of the Dnipropetrovsk region. No, right now there are not even any Russians on the border between Dnipropetrovsk and Donetsk regions, although they are trying very actively to advance further. Trehubov stated that Russia carried out multiple info and psyops. A week ago, they even filmed a video where they supposedly raised a flag somewhere on the administrative border between Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. He implied Russian statements were untrustworthy, as the Ministry of Defense had claimed victory back in February, the year 2022. In addition, the spokesperson for the Operational Strategic Group of Forces, Kortitsia, spoke about the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, where the situation is indeed extremely tense. Quote, "The Pokrovsk direction is difficult. There are attacks along the entire line of contact, especially active ones. Moreover, they are concentrated both in the west and in the east. In the west, it is an attempt to push toward the border of Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. In the east, it is an attempt to push in the direction of the Pokrovsk-Kostiantynivka highway and attempts to create a foothold beyond it." According to him, if earlier the occupiers were active in the direction of the city of Pokrovsk, who is now? Where there is less development and more open space, that's where they are trying to advance more actively. Well, he also emphasized that the situation in the Pokrovsk direction is difficult and very intense. Well, now let's move on to the assessment by the American Institute for the Study of War, which writes that Russian officials and war correspondents continue to claim that Russian troops have crossed the administrative border and are conducting offensive operations in the Dnipropetrovsk region. However, there is no confirmation of this. As analysts note, they had previously predicted that the Russian military command might advance into the southeastern part of the Dnipropetrovsk region in order to cut off Ukrainian ground lines of communication that support Ukrainian positions in the Donetsk region, with the goal of capturing the entire Donetsk region. However, analysts note that geolocation data does not confirm this yet. Quote, "As of the time of writing this material, the Institute for the Study of War has not found geolocation evidence of these claims and these reported advances near the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. It is noted that data from National Aeronautics and Space Administration's Fire Information System and satellite images from June 7-8 show thermal and infrared anomalies, and the appearance of new artillery craters along the border of the Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. This confirms the statement by the Ukrainian authorities about ongoing fighting in the Donetsk region to the east of the administrative border." Quote, "The Institute for the Study of War assesses that the current Russian tactical activity near the southeastern part of Dnipropetrovsk region is a continuation of Russian offensive efforts in the southwest of Donetsk region, and not the beginning of a new major offensive operation to seize operationally significant territory in the Dnipropetrovsk region. That's why, as they say, the Russians are once again rushing with some, statements, trying to intimidate, saying that now we're going to launch massive attacks with missiles and drones, and that they've already broken through the administrative border of the Dnipropetrovsk region and are creating a so-called buffer zone there. On the other hand, today there was a report that the Russians, on the contrary, are withdrawing some of their troops from Crimea and Donbass and trying to redeploy them to the Sumy region, to the Sumy direction. That's the direction that's really quite hot right now, and the Russians are trying to advance there. In order to put Sumy into a kind of semi-encirclement so that they could attack the city with artillery, that's where things could really get hot. But as for the Dnipropetrovsk region, the Russians, as always, are lying and deceiving Russian society, the so-called society. I put believe in quotes, they genuinely think that way. It's how Russian minds work. They are already in the Dnipropetrovsk region, all of them. But fortunately, that's not the case. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so financially through Donut using the links and details in the description of this video, or by scanning the quick response code on your screens. That's all for now. Everyone take care. Bye.